Hi everyone, and welcome to our background screencast on F. Scott Fitzgerald and The Great Gatsby. I'm hopeful that after this background information that you'll have a better understanding of some of the ideas and themes that will be present in Fitzgerald's famous novel. So first, some background about F. Scott Fitzgerald. His dates are 1896 to 1940. For our course, you can use the timeline date of 1920. He was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, another Midwestern writer along with Hemingway, and he was born into the middle class, very comfortable lifestyle. He left to attend Princeton in 1913, but he left to join the Army during World War I before graduating. He was actually stationed in Montgomery, Alabama, and that is where he met Zelda Zaire, the love of his life. Now, they were originally engaged to be married, but when Zelda realized Fitzgerald's financial background, she rejected him in 1919 because he simply just didn't make enough money. Fitzgerald was heartbroken and he returned home and began writing. In 1920, in fact, he wrote and published This Side of Paradise, which was a novel that described some of the excess of the Roaring Twenties, and he found immediate success and fame. Coincidentally, Zelda reacquainted herself with F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the two married in 1921. They became very famous celebrities, and they led a very glamorous lifestyle, epitomizing the excesses of the jazz age, complete with a lot of drinking and a lot of music and a lot of travel. In fact, due to Scott's financial success, they were able to travel abroad, and they were really very famous and lived an extravagant lifestyle, as I mentioned, that also included lots of heavy drinking. Now, they became parents to their one daughter, Frances Scott Fitzgerald, known as Scotty, in October 1921. And during this time, they also experienced some economic troubles. Even though Fitzgerald had made quite a bit of money from This Side of Paradise, due to their extravagant lifestyle, they found themselves a little short on cash. Fitzgerald tried to publish a play back in New York in 1923 that was a flop. And so they had some ongoing money troubles that led to fighting, drinking. Zelda had an affair. In 1925, Fitzgerald published The Great Gatsby, the novel that we're going to talk about, and even though it enjoyed some critical success, it was not commercially successful. So during this time in the 1920s, the Fitzgerald left for Europe. They lived in Paris in 1924 and associated with other expatriates like Hemingway as part of that lost generation. Now, Fitzgerald was writing a lot. In fact, he published short stories in order to pay the bills, and he was paid quite well, $4,000 a story, which would be about $40,000 in today's standards. But the family was still racking up debt, which led to further problems. Scott's continued drinking. Zelda's mental state also deteriorated. So in the 1930s, they returned to the United States, again facing money problems. Fitzgerald kept writing. Zelda ended up being committed to a mental asylum after a breakdown, where she lived the rest of her life until dying in 1948 after a fire came out at the institution. Scott, meanwhile, moved to Hollywood in the late 1930s, where he worked as a screenwriter and received credit for several films during this time. He established a relationship with Sheila Graham, the movie columnist, and actually died in her apartment in 1940 at the young age of 1944. So that's just a brief background about Fitzgerald. There's lots of information online you can find if you are interested in more about his biography. Now, the novel that we're concerned with, The Great Gatsby, was published in 1925. I want to tell you a little bit about its setting. In some versions of the novel, you'll see this map, which details the major setting, these two areas here north of New York City that Fitzgerald calls East Egg and West Egg. Now, in reality, they refer to Long Islands that you can still travel today. Here's a contemporary version of the map. And you'll see in this cartoon version that West Egg is on the left-hand side. That's where the new money or the less fashionable place would be to live. And East Egg is on the right side. Now, why does Fitzgerald term these areas egg? That's his invention. And it actually comes to deal with reference on page 4 and 5 to Columbus's egg. And you'll see Nick Carraway, the narrator, is going to describe this setting as similar to Columbus's egg that's squished on one end. Now, need to know a little bit of background about this tall tale. Christopher Columbus, when faced with the problem of sailing to the New World and getting funding for his trip to discover route west, had to prove to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand that the earth was not flat, because that was the predominant worldview of the time. And so Columbus said, I think the world could still exist in a spherical shape, and he pulled out an egg in order to demonstrate. And he said, if I stand this egg on end, will you believe me that the globe could also, our world, be round and not topple over? Well, all the courtiers did not believe him because, of course, if you put an egg on a table, it will roll. So Columbus whipped out an egg, and he, no doubt, to everyone's surprise, stood it on end, impressed his audience, gained funding for his trip to America, and the rest, with his discovery of this new land, as we say, is history. Now, how did Columbus do this? Well, you can see a picture on the left of his illustrating this egg feat. And if you look closer, what you notice is the egg is cracked. Not discernible from a distance, but this feat that the magician Columbus used in order to discover the New World was actually a parlor trick. He took a hard-boiled egg, cracked the surface, laid it on its own. So that will take us to a theme of this particular novel. Pay attention to the appearance of things versus a potentially cracked reality beneath the smooth surface. Pay attention to the hairline fractures, something that might be all together, might be going on beneath what we see. People might not always be what they seem. So a couple things. The setting of the novel is Nick Carraway, the main narrator, looking back on the spring, summer, and fall of 1922. As you read chapters 1 through 3, annotate characteristics of Nick, his cousin Daisy Fay, and her husband Tom Buchanan. One other thing to remember is that T.S. Eliot's poem The Wasteland was published in 1922. It also begins in springtime. So is it a coincidence that the novel also begins in 1922? All right, have fun reading. Thanks for listening.